Santa Clara County Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony. My name is Rabbi Leslie Alexander, and I'm pleased to be guiding us through this special remembrance today. We're honored that this event is sponsored by the President of the Board of Supervisors, Joe Samidian, and his colleagues on the board, Mike Wasserman, Susan Ellenberg, Dave Cortese, and Cindy Chavez. This remembrance is organized by the local Jewish community, and the organizations and individuals involved are listed in your program. We are also pleased to welcome several distinguished guests: District Attorney Jeff Rosen, Saratoga City Council Member Marilyn Bernald, and San Jose City Council Member Johnny Camus. If there are others representing elected officials here, could you please stand and identify yourself? Thank you so much for your support of this remembrance. I've served in several rabbinic roles in the Silicon Valley Jewish community, but today I am moved to be here as a proud first-generation American, the child of two Holocaust survivors. My father, of blessed memory, Rabbi Ted Alexander from Berlin, survived Kristallnacht, when state-sanctioned mobs destroyed synagogues and looted Jewish-owned businesses. My mother, Gertrude Alexander, is actually from Vienna. She was sent on a kinder transport, a child's transport from Vienna to London, when her father, a prominent attorney, was taken to Dachau. Fortunately, due to the protests of his clients, he was released, and both her parents were able to make their way to Shanghai. There they sent for her and waited for every ship coming from England for months, hoping she would be on board. I am alive here today because as the walls caved in on Jews when borders, ports, doors, windows, and boundaries shut out Jewish refugees, Shanghai accepted Jews. My mother's and father's families were among the more than 20,000 Jews that were blessed by this uncommon experience of humanity. My father later served a congregation in San Francisco founded by Shanghai refugees. My whole life, my parents taught me of the kindness, welcome, and constant bravery of the people of Shanghai. People in Shanghai had their own hardships during the war, yet they welcomed these refugees who spoke a different language, and they shared housing, medical care, and simply kindnesses with them. In Shanghai, before my parents were interned by the invading army, my mother was able to continue fashion designing, and my father was able to complete his rabbinical studies. They met and married there. We even have a movie of it. While the trauma of the Holocaust is part of my family history, we also carry the blessing of benevolence and humanitarianism extended by the people of Shanghai. My parents' love for China and sense of gratitude never waned. Each person who stood against the flood of hate during the Holocaust deserves to be honored. Today, we extend special honor to diplomats who, at the risk of their own lives, used their roles to save Jews. These Foreign Service personnel saw the Jews first and foremost, as they should have, as human beings, and helped them when they were faced with dire threats to their lives. In the worst darkness that beset the earth, these people lit a candle of righteousness. They acted by the dictates of their conscience without regard to personal and professional consequence. 4 of these diplomats are featured in the exhibit in the breezeway outside, which we hope you will spend time viewing following this program. Today, we direct your attention specifically to Feng Shan-ho, the Chinese consul general stationed in Vienna. After Austria's annexation of Nazi Germany in March 1938, the 185,000 Jews there were subjected to a severe reign of terror. While most of the world's nations refused to budge from their restrictive immigration policies, Shanghai was one place open to Jews. Consul General Ho refused to abide by the instructions of his superior, the Chinese ambassador in Berlin, Chen Ji. Chen Ji, hoping to cement closer ties with Germany, had forbidden Ho to issue visas on such a large scale, perhaps even the thousands that he intended. Although visas were not required for entrance to Shanghai, such a document was needed to leave Germany or Austria. It was only after Ho's death in 1997, at the age of 96, that evidence by survivors who benefited from Ho's aid began to be known. In 2000, Feng Shanho was awarded the title by Israel of Righteous Among the Nations for his humanitarian courage in issuing Chinese visas to Jews in Vienna despite orders to the contrary. Ho's daughter, Manli Ho, who lives in San Francisco and was sad to be unable to attend today's ceremony, researched her father's activities during the war, which he never spoke of during his lifetime. Manli connected us to one of the survivors whom she has gotten to know, Lottie Marcus. Today, we will hear the story of Lottie's survival due to the visa provided by Feng Shanho directly from Lottie herself. We take a moment first to begin our remembrance ceremony with an invocation. We are honored to welcome Reverend Norman Fong, the Executive Director of the San Francisco Chinatown Community Development Center. In addition to all his community building at CDC, Reverend Fong is a minister member of the San Francisco Presbytery and served many years as a co-pastor for the Presbyterian Church in Chinatown, which is the oldest Asian American Christian congregation in North America. Reverend Fong.
I was meant to be here. First I asked, you want me from Chinatown to come? I was so honored. But we need to build more bridges. And the stories of Lottie, I can't wait to hear it myself. It just reminds us that there's more that pulls us together than pulls us apart. Except for that Trump wall, but I'm not supposed to say that, okay? I forgot. I'm from San Francisco. It's okay there, but it's okay here? Okay. I know I was meant to be here because my name is Little Dragon, and Dr. Ho's name is Phoenix on top of the mountain, Feng. I have a twin sister who's Little Phoenix, and it goes with the dragon. I was meant to be here today. I feel it spiritually because I'm here to celebrate the Phoenix, and Lord knows we need more hope and light in the world. I just want to do a simple invocation, and I need your help. Repeat after me. Peace. Peace. Wall ping. Wall ping. Paz. Paz. Shalom. Shalom. You know, when I think of peace, which surpasses all human understanding, this is an example of it. This is a tragic situation, one of the worst in the world. But we're here to remember. To remember and build ourselves up from that, like a phoenix. I also want, second thing, I'll keep it short. I want the light from heaven, the glow from heaven, to bless us light. And so I ask that the light that glows from heaven bless us all this day. And you know what happens after the light shines upon you? We become beautiful. I want you to turn to the person to your left and right and say, you're beautiful, no matter what they look like. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Reverend Fong. I'm now honored to introduce Lottie Marcus to share her story. Should I move the mic down?
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm deeply moved by your interest in this after 70 years, that this is so live, that so many people are coming out for this. It reminds me the memory of a trauma and how you deal with it. Reminds me of the time in Shanghai when the war was over. We had no idea what happened in Europe because during the years of the war, between 41 and 47, we had no knowledge of what was going on. So the Holocaust came to us much, much later. It's not like somebody said, oh, did you know what happened? We just didn't know, and we had no way of knowing. But one of my searing images of that time was that this is after the war now, this is in Shanghai, this is in the ghetto that the Japanese put us in and made us stateless because they had to do something to appease the Germans. I don't think the Japanese were anti-Semitic the way the Germans were, but they just didn't know what to do in Shanghai. But the Red Cross had a little booth in our ghetto, and when the war was over, every day they posted names of people who had survived. So with great anxiety, people all day long went up to see, is somebody in there who survives? Is somebody not? We had no way of finding out from over there. And they didn't know because they didn't count it. There were over 153 concentration camps that held thousands of Jews. And the ones who went to the gas chamber didn't leave a note. The ones who were beaten didn't leave a note. And the ones who survived just wanted to get out. Didn't want to have anything to do with it and find a way to normalcy. Personally, my anxiety about what happened much later. The trauma often is delayed. From Vienna to Shanghai was okay. Shanghai was okay, except it was full of diseases. And every summer we had terrible diarrhea, and we had not enough medicine. And this is part of what I think are the blessings of uncertainty that you don't know. That at the end of the war, in order to get to America, you'd had to take a stool sample to the consulate. And of course, you don't know what's in your stool. And so this time I passed, and I didn't think much about it. But when I was in America, 6 months later, suddenly I got liver flukes. That's a bacteria that sits in the liver and begins to suck blood. And in Shanghai, nobody would have known what that was. But luckily, he was already in America, and I could get tropical disease help, and I was cured. But this is what I mean by the uncertainty of refugees who have no control of their life and don't know what resources there are and don't have any money to buy anything. On the other hand, I will say that I was 11 or 12 years old when I came to Shanghai. My father died 2 years later of kidney cancer. My mother was a widow who could not take this enormous change, and she became deeply depressed. So at 14, I grew up. I began to look for work. I began to support us, and I thought it was fine, and I managed. So among the things that I did was I taught English to Japanese. I graduated Shanghai Jewish School, in which they allowed the refugees' children, there were about 10 or 12, to go to school there. And I began to do anything I could. Among the things I remember now is I went to the Japanese section, I bought food, I put it on my Japanese refurbished bicycle, and I brought it to Hongkou, to our ghetto, and I sold it for a little bit more. I had long hair, and I found out that Chinese love human hair because they can make human hairnets from it. So every few months, I went there to have my hair cut, and we waited, and they paid me something, and then I waited for my hair to grow again. And the third thing that I remember that was a resource, I found that the Chinese in Shanghai had comic books which had stories on one hand, but the backside, it was clean. So I packaged those to 48 or 50, and I sold them to our grocery stores for the diarrheas that people have in the summer. So I found usefulness for that. I think we could have died 3 times. In the summer from illness, from bombs, and from hunger. There was no fresh food coming into Shanghai. There was nobody growing things in Shanghai. It was a city. It wasn't grass. And the fresh vegetables had ceased coming. So I remember that the 2 or 3 years that were really hard in terms of food were rice. And for a long time, I couldn't look at rice. The tragic thing, really tragic thing, how do I say this? I want to say that I'm a Holocaust survivor, but I've had a lot of delayed trauma. When I had to function, I functioned. But when I was safe, I began to feel things. So somewhere in the 50s, the war was over at 47, and we were talking about this from 41 to 47, I began to wake up with chattering teeth, and I saw bombs falling, and I couldn't fall asleep. By then, I had a husband, and I remember him saying to me over and again, Lottie, the war is over. Lottie, the war is over. But my body didn't believe it. So it took me a long time, maybe 9 or 10 months, after there was no danger, to really feel the danger that I denied when it was happening. Just let me tell you. So I didn't know there was a Holocaust. I mean, you know, there's been genocide in Darfur, in Bosnia, in Kenya, Somalia, Cambodia, Chile, Rwanda. There were displaced persons, you know, East Germany, West Germany, the Hmong in Vietnam, the Kurds, the Syrians, the Hondurans. So I am very sensitive to the refugee situation. And it hurts like hell what Trump says about that, and that there are 650,000 people who have no home, who have to circle the globe the way I too had to, but they're further away now. They're Syria, they're in the Middle East, etc. So they're displaced persons legally and illegally who crisscross countries and continents. And it takes a tremendous amount to support them in your mind and to think of what to do or to act against Trump and throw all this anti-immigration stuff out, because the immigration is much higher now, and I find that a desolating figure, than it was then. It's 650,000 now, and it was 220,000 then. So for those people, it's not getting safer. I regret terribly that I was in Shanghai 7.5 years, and I never learned Chinese. I had no Chinese girlfriends. I never had a Chinese socially in my house with my mother and father. And we lived side by side, ignorant of each other, except I had the feeling always the Chinese were even more poor than we were, and how could we help them, but we couldn't. I am deeply grateful, in hindsight, of 3 people who helped us. One was Laura Margolis. She was a social worker, and the United Jewish Joint sent her to Shanghai. And when she walked in, when I was working in a hospital, and she walked in, she was tall and energetic and hopeful, and I thought, oh, this is what an American looks like. I thought, they have so much energy, maybe she'll do something. And she managed to convince the Japanese, who were by then ruling our ghetto, to accept $100,000 American dollars from the Joint monthly if they would leave us alone, and then part of that money would go for a soup kitchen for those people who could not adapt to Shanghai. And in retrospect, so we were 16,000 that fled there. They came because it was an open city. It was an open city because the British in 1890s, were on an opium surge. They exported and opium and sold it to the world, and it came from the interior of Chinese, and in order to make a business of it, it came to the British, and they sold it the rest of the world. So for that reason, we had the harbor open and ships came and got. When the Japanese invaded Shanghai, I was on my way to the Shanghai Jewish School for my diploma in the high school, and I couldn't believe it when I walked back over that bridge that I'd walked 1,000 times that led to the Hongqiu section. There were soldiers everywhere, and they had bayonets. They didn't talk, they didn't say anything, and they never hurt anybody, but we didn't know what they were. I once had a bicycle and it fell, and 3 soldiers came over and they said things that I couldn't understand, and they shooed me away. They didn't help, but they didn't either punish me or anything. So we lived side by side with the Chinese and with the Japanese. So there were several traumatic memories that over the years have come back. I didn't know there were traumatic memories until they came back. One of them was about a friend I had as a child, a boy, with whom my father took him and me skiing year after year, and it was fun. Then Hitler came, and this was 38, and within 3 or 4 months, this boy, who was by then 16 or 17, had a Gestapo uniform. And by then, there was a day when the concierge, his mother, said that tonight they were going to go to Jewish homes and search them. and you better hide everything, anything you have. And we gave her all our jewelry, and came night, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, big knock on the door. I open it, and there's 7 Gestapo people standing outside in uniform with pistols, saying, we're going door to door. We're going to see what Jewish people have, something like that. But they pushed their way in. They weren't violent, but they weren't courteous either. And one of them was this boy. Only now he had a pistol. And I sort of was going to say hi, but I saw he wanted to look away and that he had joined the other side. This has been a mystery for me from that time on. How people switch sides, not explicitly, but implicitly, and what consequences it had. So that the Viennese people with whom we were very friendly suddenly were not there for us. Suddenly they turned away. And I remember one salesperson sort of trying to calm me down, saying, you're going to be all right. Your father doesn't even have an accent. It never occurred to me that my father could have an accent. He was Viennese, but she saw us as immigrants who came from Poland or from Czechoslovakia to Vienna and were treated as outsiders. So Shanghai for us was not exactly a rescue, but it certainly is a survival. It certainly, if we had stayed, I wouldn't be sitting here. That is something I cannot deal with. I can't forget it, and I can't forgive it. And how that happens is a mystery to me, because all my friends are friendly, and, you know, we're not violent. But when there is a change that's not gradual, but it's radical, the way Hitler came in on a tank, followed by, I don't know, 30, 40 tanks, was radical. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And what was really surprising is that when he came in, and I saw that, suddenly there were thousands of women waving swastika flags. And I kept thinking, when did they saw them? I mean, where did they come from? Did they hide them somewhere in the attic? I mean, what pronounced this joy that they had in suddenly seeing Hitler in there when we thought we were moving towards a social democratic country? So there were surprises like that I've never known how to deal with it. And I am well, I have a good life, I have 3 grown children, I had a wonderful marriage, I have a profession. But you can't forget and you can't forgive. That's the hardest thing. There is evil, and you don't know how to fight it. You don't know, suddenly it comes at you, and what's the word? You have no defenses. The Jewish people in Vienna never had weapons, wouldn't have thought of having weapons. But Vienna was accepting of the Jews, and Vienna had talented people like Freud and Mahler and Stefan Zweig, authors, who contributed to the culture of Vienna. So we felt really at home. Shanghai, the more I think about it, the more it saved us, but we never adapted to it. As I said, it hurts me now that I had the chance to learn Chinese. It never occurred to me, because my father kept saying, with English you can go anywhere. So that's the real language. And we didn't, I think we had a Caucasian arrogance about the Chinese. As I said, I taught English to some Chinese, but I never got close to them, and they didn't either, and they don't have an answer for it. But Shanghai was a safe place we had a hard time, but we weren't gassed, we weren't murdered, we weren't shot. We survived. Survival is the name of the game. I'm going to tell you one more anecdote that is the kind of thing that a refugee needs, that happens out of the blue with no foresight. When the war was over, my mother's brother, was by then an American, had become very successful with a Viennese bakery. And he sent us an affidavit so that we could come here. And I was delighted to go. And so we were going to go to San Francisco on an American converted troop ship, and from there to Mobile, Alabama. But my mother said to me, I have some friends in Los Angeles, let's go and visit. Okay, we visit. It turns out that these friends had a daughter who was my age, and she said, let me show you Los Angeles. You're missing something. I'm going to take you around. And she took me around, and for the first time I had a concert in the Hollywood Bowl. I went to the theater, hadn't seen a play. It was suddenly a normalcy that I could get in touch with, for which I had no plan. So then I decided, maybe I should stay in Los Angeles. And I see myself putting nickels in telephone booth, calling all the radio stations, all the movie places, like MGM, asking for a job as a bilingual secretary. There were many German-speaking directors in these movie studios, and so German was sort of a language of work. It could work. It wasn't the language of the enemy. Because I must tell you, I will assert this quickly, that after the war, when I heard German spoken, I had an anxiety attack. I couldn't stand it. And didn't want to hear it. But, so I call up all these movie studios asking for a bilingual secretary's job. And when it comes to MGM, suddenly said, yeah, we're interviewing, come on out. So I take my map, I take a bus, I get there like 2 hours later, and they say, oh, that job has just been taken. High, low. Something, I was 23 years old, I guess 23 years old, I'm persistent, I don't know whether I could this today, made me say, look, you're here at MGM, you can write to your friends in Shanghai. You were 2 weeks ago in Shanghai, and here you are in the heart of Hollywood. And I walk around, I say, I'll look and see what this is like, and I'll have something to tell my friends. And so I walk around, stages, sets, lots of activities, and suddenly this kind voice bends over and said, can I help you? You look lost. I burst into tears. I tell her what I'm doing, why this is here, and she listens, and then she says, can you file? And I said, yes. She said, come on Monday. So that's my survival story. Okay? One more.
Let's all thank Lottie once more. We're really grateful to you, Lottie, for providing all of us this powerful opportunity to hear your firsthand account of survival. And your positive attitude is an inspiration to all of us. It's been quite a privilege. As you reflect on Lottie's experiences and on our responsibilities today to fight rising hate in society, we welcome cellist Peter Gelfand and pianist Diane Fisher, who will play Kaddish from Deux Mélodies Hébraïques by the French composer Maurice Ravel. The title Kaddish means holy, and is also the title of the Jewish prayer of mourning. Thank you, Peter and Diane. We were led to Lottie through the exhibit about courageous diplomats. I now have the privilege of introducing Deputy Consul General of Israel for the Pacific Northwest, Ravit Ber, to share her perspective as a diplomat. Ravit assumed the role of Deputy Consul General in August 2015. Prior to joining the consulate, Ravit served for 5 years coordinating Israel's cooperation with the European Union. Ravit is a career diplomat, serving previously in the Ivory Coast and in Cyprus. Please welcome Deputy Consul General Ravit Ber.
Hello. afternoon. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Every year on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, it's a very emotional day for every Jew around the world, and for me as an Israeli. I'm specifically, as a Jew, I'm not a descendant of the Holocaust survivors. My family came from Iraq. Fortunately, the Holocaust did not reach Iraq, but I grew up in Israel, and I'm Israeli. And the Holocaust is a part of the Israeli story in a very, very profound way. So anyone that's ever been to Israel during Holocaust Memorial Day, and by the way, this day was decided by the Israeli government after the establishment of the State of Israel. So it's in the law in Israel, and it is done all over the world by the Jewish communities. During Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel, we have multiple ceremonies. The whole country essentially is remembering the disaster and the heroism that took place during Holocaust time. And we have this moment of silence where a siren is heard all over the country, and everyone stops, including cars in the middle of the road, stand up and honor those 6 million people for 1 minute. It's a very profound and strong moment. So it's always difficult for me not to be in Israel during this day. So I'm a diplomat myself, and being a diplomat, we wanted in the last year to honor the 36 foreign diplomats that saved Jews during the Holocaust. So 36 is, by the way, for anyone that knows Jewish theology, is a very unique number because they're talking about the first 36 righteous people. It's part of the Jewish theology, so it's kind of amazing that 36 foreign diplomats from all over the world, from Sweden, from Japan, from El Salvador, from Brazil, and from China were recognized as people that saved Jews in the Holocaust. And they were recognized by Yad Vashem, which is the museum, the Holocaust Museum and Memorial in Jerusalem, as righteous among the nations. And being a diplomat, you are actually a government employee, and you're subject to the rules that your government gives you. And each and every one of these people did something against their rules of their own government. They actually did a crime according to their own government. And you just imagine in communities such as China and Japan and places like that to do something against your own government. Many of those people paid heavy prices afterwards, losing their career, suffering from critics from their own government. So they paid for that. But those people saved thousands of people just by the fact that they gave visas to their countries. They gave papers. And we're not talking about what's happening today when everything is online and everything can pass through computer. These were the 40s, and those people were alone, representing their governments in Vienna or in Brussels or in other capital or in Vilnius, I don't know how it's called today. So they were alone, and they could give visas, and they can, in a way, hide that from their own governments because that was really far away. And if you're a Brazilian and you're given a visa, you could do that without your government knowing for a long period of time, and they saved thousands of people. And every one of them is amazing. But the thing is also that they were a drop in the ocean, because the vast majority of diplomats and the vast majority of people were complicit and did not stand against the horrors that were happening on European soil during the 1940s. Because most of the people either participated or were silent when 6 million Jews, and not only Jews, but 6 million Jews, half of the Jewish people were murdered during the Second World War. So these people are even more exceptional, because when everyone around them did nothing, they did something, which is quite amazing. So as diplomats, we thought it would be extremely important to mark what they did. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel produced this exhibit that you can see outside, and I really encourage you to come and see because those stories are pretty remarkable. Some of them are even quite famous, by like Raoul Wallenberg, but some less. So I do want to say, just before I finish, even today, Jews experience anti-Semitism and events. ADL report just came this week showing in the United States that anti-Semitism occurrences doubled just in 2018. Jews are going to have better times, worse times, depends where in the world, but throughout history they suffered persecution and events that kind of ended up, I guess, in the Holocaust, but did not end because it's going to continue, whether it's in the Ukraine, whether it's in France, whether it's in other places. Jews in certain times will feel incredibly unsafe. In other times, they will feel very safe. Hopefully, most of the times they will. But this is why the State of Israel exists, because the Zionist movement understood at the late 19th century that there has to be a homeland for the Jewish people. There has to be a place for them in situation of crisis that they can go to. And during the Second World War, Israel did not exist yet. And Jews were knocking on doors all over the world, even here in the United States, but the doors were shut. Jews could not go anywhere. If there weren't So there were the 36 diplomats that allowed them those visas, and there were other people that survived. There were a lot of people that did survive, but most of those people, 6 million people, did not make it. They didn't have a homeland, and they didn't have a place to go. So us as the State of Israel see maybe our first priority and the most important thing about the existence of the State of Israel to be a homeland to any Jew around the world. So hopefully Jews will be safe and happy wherever they are in the world. But if they don't, they can come to Israel, and we will open the doors and make sure that they will be safe. So I said my family is not a descendant of Holocaust survivors, but my family was also a refugee. 120,000 Jews of Iraq were expelled in 1950, 1951 from Iraq. Their citizenship was taken away from them. So my family had to escape, and they came to Israel, and Israel accepted them. And stories like that exist with many other diasporas, because this is what Israel is for. And one last thing that I want to say, we're Jews. We know what it is to be looked at as different, to be stigmatized, and it's our responsibility as Jews to look around and make sure that no one else is treated the way we are treated or we're treated. So it's our responsibility to stand for the weak, to stand for other groups that suffer such treatment everywhere, anytime. So it's not easy. World politics is complicated, but it's still our duty. And also us as the State of Israel, we try to do good. We try to stand with people that need some protection. So I always want to finish and say the most important words, never again. And we need to work hard to make sure that it will never happen again.
Thank you very much, Deputy Consul Bear. Now I would like to invite Supervisor Simidian to present the county's proclamation recognizing Holocaust remembrance.
Thank you, Rabbi, and let me say good afternoon and thank you to all of you for being here today. As it happens, I've had the opportunity to visit Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem that the Deputy Consul General just referenced, on 2 occasions over the course of the past year. And as I had noted on previous visits, tucked away in that extraordinary space at Yad Vashem is a quote by the German Jewish essayist Kurt Tucholsky. And the quote is this: "A country is not only what it does, but also what it tolerates." Which is why we are here today, and which is why I believe it is so fitting and proper that we take time today to reflect on the role of our nation's emissaries, our diplomats, the role they play in defining and communicating our national character. As the Yad Vashem website observes, and I'm quoting again, as Nazi Germany intensified its anti-Jewish policy, increasing number of Jews were driven to flee and to seek ways to emigrate. Long lines of desperate people seeking visas formed in front of foreign consulates. But the free world was reluctant to permit entry of the many refugees. Most diplomats continued to employ ordinary procedures in extraordinary times. Only very few proved to be an exception, and faced with the refugees' plight, were willing to act against their government's policy and instructions and suffer the consequences. That's the end of the quote. But there was yet another quote on the wall at Yad Vashem that caught my attention and has caught my attention repeatedly. And it's from a delegate to the 1938 Evian Conference on Jewish Refugees, where the Australian delegate, Thomas W. White, declared, and I'm quoting the delegate now, in 1938, "As we have no real racial problem, we are not desirous of importing one by encouraging any scheme of large-scale foreign migration." End quote. That was the official and formal response to the plea from the government of Australia. Now, to be clear, the Evian Conference, which was convened by President Roosevelt to deal with the Jewish refugee plight, was a call to the nations of the world, more than 30. Roosevelt called for an international conference to promote the emigration of Austrian and German Jewish refugees and to create an international organization whose purpose would be to deal with the general refugee problem. But when he proposed the conference, our American president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, made it clear that no country would be forced to change its immigration quotas, but would instead be asked to voluntarily make these changes. During the course of the conference in 1938, it became painfully obvious that there really weren't countries willing to volunteer anything, with a single sole exception: the tiny nation of the Dominican Republic. Tragically, the world's democracies had made it extremely clear that they were not willing to help European Jewry. That was more than 80 years ago. That was then. But 80 years later, in 2018, Australian members of Parliament stood on the floor of their House to take up the culpability of their nation and their diplomats back in 1938. And an Australian MP, Member of Parliament Stuart Robert, gave a heartfelt and very sincere apology to the Jewish people while celebrating Israel on the floor of Australia's Parliament. And I want to share his remarks somewhat at length, 80 years after Evian. He said, and here I'm quoting directly, "This year, unfortunately, marks the 80th anniversary of sorrow. It is the anniversary of the end of the fateful Evian Conference in France, convened by U.S. President Roosevelt in 1938, with 31 countries to discuss the issue of Jewish refugees fleeing the horror of Nazi persecution. It's an anniversary, he said, it's an anniversary of the world turning its back on God's holy Jewish people. It's an anniversary that this Parliament will seek to atone for today. And then he said out loud, we issue an apology for the indifference shown the Jewish people by our Parliament in 1938 that worsened the Holocaust and its impacts. We do this because in 1938, Australia sent a representative with a message of indifference. At Evian, the Australian representative on behalf of the Australian government declined to assist the Jewish people in their hour of need. Our nation's government, he said, turned its back on our Jewish friends at the exact time they needed us. Our Parliament said nothing. Understandably, our representative statement is still visible at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem. It is representative of all other nations' responses of indifference at the Evian conference. Australia was not alone. The world turned its back. But for Australia's indifference, this Parliament says sorry. He went on to say, we do this from both sides of the aisle because both the Labour and Liberal parties argued against the intake of Jewish refugees 80 years ago. So today, he said, both parties stand together to say sorry for the indifference at Evian. He acknowledged that an estimated 6 million Jews and millions of others died during the Holocaust, and went on to say this was exacerbated by the fact that Australia and the world failed to do more to protect the Jewish people. Thus today, and he's saying this 80 years later, thus today we seek to honor the memory of all who lost their lives in the Holocaust and make right a wrong perpetrated by Australia and the rest of the world to the Jewish people, that of indifference. Today we present our Parliament's guilt offering through our words, and we draw a line under this Evian conference and sorrow. We vow never again to turn our backs on Israel or our Jewish brothers and sisters, wherever they are in the world. I share these comments from another place and another time because they are equally applicable today and anywhere in the world. I share these remarks because to me they are a reminder that it is never too late to learn, it is never too late to atone, and it is never too late to recommit ourselves, to stand up, speak out, and push back when called upon to do so. With all that having been said, before we make the ceremonial presentation of the proclamations, let me say thank you again for being here, and may God bless you and keep you. Thank you all very, very much. Colleagues, I want to ask my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors to join me in the presentation to the Deputy Consul General and to Lottie Marcus as we officially commemorate this day as Holocaust Remembrance Day. Mike, you want to grab one? Dave, you want to grab one? And I think the least we could do after hearing from Lottie Marcus is take the proclamation out to her rather than ask her to step up. So, Ms. Marcus, if you'll wait just a moment, I'm going to lead all four of my colleagues. leave that one with Ms. Marcus. And we have a duplicate here for presentation to the Deputy Consul General. Would you please join us in welcoming her back to the podium so that we can make the presentation. And if you'll let us turn our backs just one more time, I promise that will be the end of that. So, come on up. Thank you to all of you who took the time to be here today, and we so appreciate the fact that some of our colleagues in local government are here as well from Saratoga, Santa Clara, Cupertino, San Jose, and other communities throughout the county. I apologize if I've missed any who are represented. Please join me once again in thanking Lottie Marcus for being with us and the Deputy Consul General. Rabbi, I return the podium to you.
Thank you, Supervisor Simidian, and thank you to all of the supervisors who are here today who gave this important recognition of our local survivor community and of the righteous diplomats. In Jewish tradition, your name is the key to your soul. Your name tells the story of your mission on earth, and we traditionally pass along names from generation to generation to continue that mission. I would like to invite two families who lost loved ones in the Holocaust to come up together with their multiple generations and speak the names of their relatives. Rochelle Greenfield and her family and Doris Schwartz Lisenby, please come join me with your families. While during this observance, Rochelle and Doris's families will only share the names. We hope that after the observance, attendees will choose to come to them and to learn more about their family's history.
We are here to support the community that supported our surviving family, and to honor others who survived, and to remember all who were lost.
In memory of my great-grandfather, Richard Ashner, from Vienna, Austria, and Prague, Czechoslovakia.
In memory of my great-grandmother, Alice Zimbler Ashner, from Vienna, Austria, and Prague, Czechoslovakia.
In memory of my wife Doris's grandparents, Dr. Gottwald Schwartz and Charlotte Hiller Schwartz, from Vienna, Austria.
I'm Doris Schwartz Lisenby, and I'm going to honor the memory of our grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and others who are unnamed and innocent and were killed just because they were Jews.
We thank these wonderful families representative of so many of us who are here today. At this time, I would like to welcome Supervisor Ellenberg to recite the Kaddish prayer, also known as the Mourner's Prayer. The recitation of this prayer dates to the Middle Ages and testifies that the deceased have left behind worthy descendants who will create a better future, a future of peace. The prayer does not mention death at all, but instead affirms life. Many people lost all their family in the Holocaust and have no one to recite the mourner's prayer for them. But today, we also remember and mourn Lori Gilbert Kay, murdered last week at the Chabad Synagogue of Poway near San Diego in an act of anti-Semitic violence, only 6 months after the other anti-Semitic shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the Tree of Life congregation, which claimed the lives of 11 Jews in prayer. And while the Kaddish is a Jewish prayer, we recognize that every community has their own prayer. And we reach out and remember those in Christianity and Islam murdered recently in their places of worship as well. It is traditional for everyone to stand, if you are able, for this particular Kaddish, to collectively honor the memory of the martyrs of the Jewish people.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad zivra chirotei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei zechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'yizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mavorach le'olam u'me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitale, v'yithalal, shemei dekudusha barechu. Le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiram be'alma, v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellenberg. We remember the 6 million, but still we construct reasons to hope. There must never be a time when we fail to protest injustice. Our Jewish texts tell us that by saving a single human being, we can save the world. We must remember that peace is not God's gift to God's creatures. It is our gift also to each other. Now we are pleased to invite 2 Yavna Day School students, Max Silverstein and Kira Shatil, to present the Candle of Hope and to share a poem by Emily Dickinson.
Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words. It never stops at all.
And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm.
I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me.
The Candle of Hope is followed by our closing songs. The 7th grade Yavna Day School students Additional students with Max and with Kira: Harrison Wilmot, Hannah Silberstein, Noah Reisblatt, Leilani Sallow, Maya Weissman, Eden Menopaz, and Ricky Kapiloff. Led by their teacher, Jamie Zimmer, will sing Yisroelik, a Yiddish song about a young boy in the ghetto who has been orphaned. And then the students will close with the Hebrew song Ani Ma'amin. The title means I believe. It is taken from the 13 Principles of Faith of the Rambam of Maimonides and is repeated as a mantra of faith even in the face of extreme adversity.
Hey, come and buy tobacco, come buy my stockerin.
These days the stuff we're selling cheap as dirt.
A life for just a penny,
1 cent is what I earn.
Have you heard? Geesties vrolijk, ich bin das Kind vom Ghetto. Geesties vrolijk, I have dicker jung. Host verblieben, Gole netto, te lang ich als noch, als Wiesje und Azung.
One more thank you to the Yavna students. Many thanks to everyone who participated in this meaningful ceremony today. As we close, we would like to acknowledge and honor the survivors in our midst. Can you please stand if you yourself are a survivor of the Holocaust? Now I would like to ask the second generation survivors here today to stand, the children of those who are survivors. Thank you for bearing witness and for teaching us. I would like to invite both generations to come up and light a candle in memory. Following them, anyone else who wishes to is invited to light a candle of remembrance for those lost in the Holocaust. As we light a candle for them, we are also holding in our hearts the memory of those murdered in any genocide, and in the hope that we will one day see the end of people's inhumanity to others. Kindly exit quietly during the candle lighting and join us for a reception in the lobby.